As we wrap up this particular section, if you need to take a break, stretch your legs, whatever, I know sometimes it's like when I'm finishing a book, it's like I just want to finish the book, but you don't get as much out of it as you should because you're just trying to push through. Just because these commands are at the end of a section doesn't make them miscellaneous. You're going to be glad you know these for your exam and the real world and a lab environment, especially when it comes to these two commands that you've seen all over my equipment throughout the course: Exec Timeout 00 and Logging Synchronous. And what the heck are these two commands? You might think they're default commands. They're not. It's just that as soon as I bring up a router, I just type Exec Timeout 00 Logging Synchronous in lab environments. And you're going to see why here in just a moment. I know that's slightly off screen, but there we go. Now, let's start with Logging Synchronous, because this is more of a convenience command than anything else. The problem is when the router wants you to know something, it wants you to know right now. And switch, same way, of course. You open an interface, it's not going to wait by default until you're done typing to let you know about it. And you can see here on the board, I started typing a sentence immediately after I opened an interface. There's serial 0 no shut. And I just start typing. So here I am, and here's the system message, configure from console by console, okay? And I just kept typing, but I only got TYP out, and then I got my message saying the physical interface was up. Then I finished the word typing and got one more word in edgewise, literally, and then I've been interrupted quite badly by the other two messages. The line protocol changed state to up, and then it went down after that. Now, that may seem really trivial, but when you have a long command entry interrupted by a console message, you're going to wonder how to prevent that from happening. It's really obnoxious. By configuring the logging synchronous command on the console port, all you're doing is telling the router to hold those messages until it detects no input from the keyboard and no other output from the router, such as a show commands output. Really handy little command. Now, the other command I always put on a console port of a home lab router or switch, and notice I mentioned home lab, is Exec Timeout 00. And what this does, it disables the console session default inactivity timeout, which by default is 5 minutes and 0 seconds. And let's go to the live equipment here. 0, 0. And I know I've given you this lecture before, and you're getting it again. Anytime you've got a command that has a number in it, always use iOS help to check and see what it is, because you could just have a brain right there and just say, okay, I need to set it to 30 seconds, and the first number is seconds. Well, it's not. It's minutes and then seconds. So you would need to set it to something totally different for that. If you put 30 here, of course, and nothing else, your timeout is then 30 minutes. So the reason we do this with 00, again, is to just disable the timeout completely. A lot of times with Cisco commands that are based on time, if you're putting a 0 in, what you're actually doing is negating it. Now, you could easily double it, as I mentioned on the board there, and you just put 10 right there for your minutes, 0 for seconds. This would double the timer in effect. And then that's it. Now, this is a bit of a safety concern with a production network. It's not something you want to zip in and just put Exec Timeout 00 on. There are security risks associated with doing so. They are fantastic commands to know for your exam and for your home lab as well. But again, I'd urge you to do some additional digging on Cisco's website before you use Exec Timeout 00 on your production networks. Now, the keystroke shortcuts, I've used a couple of these throughout the course, and I want to mention them here. These are good ones to know for your exams, but as far as real-world usage, it's up to the individual. No one's going to mock you for using one shortcut and not using another one. But a couple that I'd like you to know, and that really do help, the first one is that up arrow, and that's going to show you the last couple of commands that you used. And that really comes in handy if, in case you just didn't want to retype frame map IP 172.12.123.2 321 broad, which is a frame relay command. Let's say that you just entered it and you didn't mean to, or you just wanted to run it again. Well, you just use your up arrow there, and you have to get on the interface. And there it is. So let's say you wanted to negate that. And that's what I meant to say a second ago. I was tripping over my tongue. Frame map IP 172.12.123.2 321 broad. It's a pretty long command. And if you haven't taken the CCNA portion of frame relay yet, you won't know what this means. That's fine. Let's assume that you just entered it and you mistyped a number in it. You're like, I just want to get that off of there. Did you see the cursor move to the front of the line there? That was Control A, and this is a shortcut that I really like. It's going to save you a lot of typing. Because if you want to negate a command that you just recently put on, just use the up arrow to go through your history buffer, and then when you get to that command you want to negate, do a Control A, move the cursor to the front of the line, and then just type no. I'm not going to do that here because it's going to tear one of my delsies down. But you just do it just like that. It's real. Those are my favorite ones, really, is just moving through the history buffer. I usually use the up and down arrows to do that. If you want to use Control P to move up through it and Control N to move back down through it, the history buffer, that's fine. And again, Control A, love that one because it's great for negating commands. Takes the cursor all the way to the front of your current command. Control E will take you all the way to the end of your current command. I don't run into the usage for that one as often, but Control A, I really do like that one. Those are good ones to know for your exam. Now, if you want to move around on a per character basis in your current command without deleting characters, you can use the left and right arrows to do so, as you would expect to move, left moves you to the left, right moves you to the right, backwards and forwards. You can also use Control B to move backward one character, or Control F to move forward one character. I'm not too much on the controls to do that. I'd really rather just reach for my arrow keys, but again, it is personal preference. Some of the lesser used shortcuts, Control D deletes one character, but you can do the same thing with the backspace key. If you want to move back and forward on a word-by-word basis, you can do Escape B and Escape F. There are other shortcuts. If you are the kind of person that just wants to master all of these, I perfectly understand. That full list is available on Cisco.com, certainly. I'm sure you can find them on other sites as well, but these are the most commonly used commands. Like I said, get used to using that up and down arrow and going through the history buffer, because that really does prevent a lot of typing. Now, let's talk about that history buffer for just a minute. If you want to see the entire command history, you can run show history, because sometimes I'll be running through the commands and it's like, well, I don't see the one I wanted. Well, what you could do is just show history. And that by default is going to show you the last 10 commands that you ran, which will include show history. So it's really showing you the last 9 commands that you put in. Now you can change that a little bit if you want. If you're in the middle of a large config or a tough troubleshooting situation, maybe you want to see the last 20 commands you ran, or you want to do that in advance, you can change the size of the history buffer from its default of 10. Now you can do this at the console port or the VTY line level. Changing the default for the console port does not change the default for the VTY line, as you would expect, and vice versa. And again, you just use the history size command, and that would be it. Let's use the console port here. And there's your size of your history buffer. I personally like to set it to 20. I usually do that. I like to see the last 20 commands I ran, or have that option to go back through the last 20, but 10 is perfectly fine. It's a good default. But it's good for you to know not only how to see the last 10 commands, but also see how to change the size of that buffer. The physical side to switches, I actually moved to the switching section because I want you to see it there. So that actually concludes this portion of the course. Take a breather, and I'll see you on the next set of videos.